Okay, so this is lesson one for Thursday, the 30th of April, but it is a continuation of our discussion on the music article, and I want us to talk about specifically now structure. Um, so we said that essays are more of a subjective type of writing, news articles are going to be more objective. Essays, we tend to think about longer paragraphing, a 5-paragraph essay, which is kind of what we have been looking at, has that introductory paragraph, 3 paragraphs in the body, a conclusion, and each one of those are fairly, lengthy in development. Now, certainly, an essay can be very long. An essay can be pages and paragraphs long. But we tend to think about that kind of lengthier writing and sentences that kind of flow in this more lyrical way. Lyrical means kind of smooth and long, drawn out, okay? With news articles that are more objective, more based on facts, we're going to find that the paragraphing can be various lengths, okay? And that the sentence structure there may be a lot more short sentences that are very quick, kind of factual pieces of information. There may be some longer sentences, but it's going to have a different tone all the way through because it's a news article, right? In this particular case, the writer has decided to develop the article using subheadings. Some articles will use subheadings. Subheadings are really a way of sort of introducing the topic of each paragraph, and they kind of take the place a little bit of a topic sentence even. It's a very organized way. I wonder, for you personally, if you like subheadings, if they help you to understand an article more. For me, they always do. Subheadings always keep me on track as I read an article. In the introductory part of this article, I noticed that the author has used 3 short paragraphs. I think he or she wanted the introduction to have a little bit of a rhythm to it, okay? Here's one scene, imagine this. Here's another scene, imagine this, okay? Da-da, da-da. And then, boom, questions, or a question. Would you choose the same music for both scenes? The article has used, or the author, has used the anecdote, the story, twice, and then the questioning technique in the introduction. She's done it, he's done it in 3 little paragraphs, a little bit of rhythm there, and the author has embedded, okay, the topic of the article in that 3rd paragraph of the introduction. Look at the 3rd paragraph. Would you choose the same music for both scenes? Probably not, because different types of music trigger different types of emotion. That is the thesis statement. That is the topic of this article. This is what the author wants to discuss in the following paragraphs. Of course, with the title being such a long title, we also very clearly get the topic from the title. But here the author has embedded it again in the introduction. I think that the introduction is very effective for this article. Then we have our first subheading, and that gives us a very big clue then about what the topic of this section is going to be. We know that this section is going to, in each following section, will enforce this main idea of how music triggers emotions, okay? And so in this emotions affect mind and body section, we'll learn about those exact aspects, the brain and body physical reactions to music. We see that the author has used some various techniques to help the reader along. If you look at the first line of the second paragraph, studies have shown that listening to music changes our pulse, our breathing, and even our temperature, okay? Instead of 3 sentences, music changes our pulse. It also changes our breathing. Music changes our temperature. The author has combined those for the reader, separated them with commas because they are a list, and emphasized the third one by using the word even. Changes our pulse, our breathing, and even our temperature, okay? As if to say, isn't this amazing? So she writes this, that sentence in an interesting way rather than a very factual 3 little short statements about those things. And then immediately notice that she gives examples, okay? If you're going to state a fact, examples will really help to bring that fact to life, right? I also wanted to point out that in the next paragraph, where the writer says we experience music temporally, I think the writer knew that for many people, and this article is written on the common, news front, so it's written for English-speaking people as well as English learners. Excuse me. But I think she knows that the word temporally is not the most common word out there. People don't use temporally every day. I can't remember the last time I used temporally, except with you guys. So she does what good writers do, and that is defines that word for us, but in a way that is very easy to read, and it fits so nicely with her writing style. We experience music temporally. In other words, that's our cue. She's about to explain what temporally means. In other words, music comes alive second by second as we listen to it. Oh, so now I kind of understand what temporally means. And again, she gives an example to what that means by using the iPhone example. Notice that each paragraph, or section, excuse me, not paragraph, but each section, she, or he, I'm sorry, Asok, I don't mean to leave the men out. I'll try to say he from now on this one. But notice that at the end of each section, there is a bit of a conclusion sentence for that section. Remember, we conclude at the end of a piece of writing, but those conclusions at the ends of sections or at the ends of paragraphs help us to sort of wrap that paragraph up. If it's an essay and we've done a paragraph, we want to kind of wrap that paragraph up. In this case, she sort of wraps up her sections. And she, wraps this one up, and it is listening in the moment, but your brain is also predicting what is going to come next. She's wrapping that paragraph up. In the next section, she includes a quote. He includes a quote. Sorry, I did it again. Includes a quote from an expert. Certainly when we quote information, we must always put the source, and you certainly know how important that is. And how important also it is to use some quotes in our writing, especially if we're writing a news article. But anytime we want to show that something we believe in is based on research, and that we have looked to research and found, some interesting things that people have said, people who are qualified to say them. And so she does introduce, gives the full name of the music psychologist, and even explains what a music psychologist does, and then includes a quote about how this music psychologist says that we use this whole idea of expectations about what's going to come next in the song that we might be listening to, or the tune that we might be listening to. In the next section, notice that he inserts that little comment in parentheses at the end of the first paragraph. When he's talking about the different emotions that music can convey, he says, think of the first few notes of the theme music from Jaws. Now, he puts that in parentheses because it's kind of a side thought, isn't it? It's almost like he's going along telling us this information, and he's like, oh, think about this, okay? And so he uses the parentheses to sort of set that aside, and to kind of give the reader an opportunity to sort of buy in, if you will. Buy in means to become a part of this understanding that he's trying to convey. Think about this, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. That's what he's saying there. Body movements. Just one paragraph here, okay? So he doesn't have to follow, a particular number of paragraphs. We've got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3 in some sections. It doesn't really matter. He has the writer's license. He can do what he wants to do. The idea is to say what needs to be said in an effective way. And then he kind of wraps up the entire article in this last section that happens to be 3 paragraphs long by saying, here's all of this information about what music can do, how it can affect us. But the bottom line is that we are affected somewhat by music because of what we've been exposed to all of our lives. And we've come to have our own understanding of types of music and the feelings that they evoke. And this began for us when we were in the womb, and it continues, and it can change as we adapt to different types of music that we might encounter for the first time, and then we like it, and we adapt to it. We listen to it more and more, and it becomes a part of our lives. So what we listen to and how it makes us feel sort of make up who we are in that way, and in the musical sense, and in our tastes, and make us as unique as, say, our fashion style, our hairstyle, our makeup style, whatever it might be. This is just another way that makes us who we are. So I think in terms of format, structure, this is a good example for us of a news article. It's not a breaking news article, obviously. This is not like having, an article of the most up-to-date information on unemployment or any topic out there. but still it's a newsworthy article that you might find in a news magazine such as Time magazine, or maybe in the section of the newspaper that talks about cultural sorts of things. So I hope that you will feel comfortable in writing an article at some point in time, and feeling that you have that writer's license to be creative a little bit with how you structure your piece. All right. I think we have just enough time in this section to begin an activity, and then I will have to pause. So I'm going to clear the board here, and we will switch gears. I seem to use that a lot. I'm going to grab some papers right over here on the table. We'll switch gears to Sue's favorite topic, and that's analogies. I sent you a couple of analogy papers. One of them is on writing analogies, and the other is on combining analogies. Writing and combining. And these are, some of the examples here are a little bit higher level, I think. There may be some vocabulary that we'll need to stop and talk about. So if you haven't printed these off, I would encourage you to print them off right now, and then we'll do them together. So let's look at writing analogies. And as we go along, I will highlight the words that I think might be newer vocabulary words. So by higher level, I'm really talking about just making sure that we understand what the vocabulary means so that we can figure out the analogy, right? All right, the first one, moisten, is to soak. When something is moistened, it is made kind of wet, okay? But when we soak something, it's very, very wet. So a sponge that is moist is also, we might use the word damp, D-A-M-P. A sponge that is soaked is dripping, okay, with water. Moisten is to soak as, what do you think? I wish I could hear you. As cool is to freeze. All right? So cool, a cool drink, and a moist sponge. A soaked sponge, very heavily wet, and a frozen drink. Moisten is to soak, as cool is to freeze. Number 2, massive means huge, huge, okay. Massive is too small, as giant is to dwarf. And dwarf, we think about the Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, okay? But we can also use dwarf just to talk about anything that is very small.